María Meseguer, and today I'm going to present my Bachelor thesis on the relationship between income inequality and political polarization. This is the structure the presentation will follow. This thesis aims to provide an in-depth exploration of income inequality and political polarization, two phenomena that have been on the rise since the 1980s and have notably contributed and shaped out current societal, economic, and political reality. There is no straightforward explanation for the development of either of these. However, it is important to acknowledge the different variables and factors that have contributed to the formation and continue to shape their trends throughout time. So I will now briefly explain the first section on income inequality measures. Income inequality is basically the fact that different people earn different amounts of money. There are many ways to measure and analyze this income distribution among different populations. And when these measures are combined, they are able to provide in-depth knowledge about how income is actually distributed. During the thesis, I have mostly focused on the Gini coefficient, which has proven to be one of the easiest to interpret and compare as it provides values between 0 and 1, where 0 represents perfect equality and 1 represents perfect inequality. Regarding recent trends in OECD countries, the richest 10% of the population earns 9.6 times more income than the poorest 10%. I wanted to highlight how there are major differences within the European Union itself. For example, Nordic European countries such as Norway, Sweden, or Denmark have lower inequality levels than other European countries, which are typically in the south, such as Spain, Portugal, Italy, or Greece. For example, Portugal has a ratio of 10 to 1, whereas Greece has a shifting ratio of 13 to 16 to 1, which is extremely alarming. Also, I wanted to note that there are considerable differences in non-European OECD countries, for example, Japan and Mexico, where Japan has a ratio of 10 to 1 and Mexico an incredible ratio of 27 to 1. Basically, from data collected since the 1980s up to today, we can identify how inequality trends are short interludes that peak and then fall back again rather than long-term continuous increase of inequality levels. I have separated the causes of the growing gap between the rich and the poor into two categories: globalization and structural. I would like to make a special comment on the technological change driven by globalization. It has played an important role in increasing the skill premium needed for newly created jobs, and most importantly, for already existing jobs that have upgraded its skill-based needs. As a result, the growth in employment triggered by technological advances is mainly founded on skill-based opportunities, which unfortunately act as a wage dispersion driver among the population of OECD and European countries. This means that only people who are able to access higher education and specialized training will be able to access those opportunities and earn higher wages. When talking about structural causes, I would like to highlight the fact that non-standard labor severely increases inequality, as workers, for example temporary workers, have worse wage conditions than their full-time colleagues, and they are often low-skilled and lack job security or access to training. I have classified the effects of income inequality into economic growth and society cohesion. I have explored the fact that in terms of economic growth, there is no consensus on whether the relationship between growth and inequality is positive or negative. Some argue that an adequate or the so-called optimal level of inequality is beneficial for economies and effectively fosters growth. They say that an optimal level of inequality helps to employ an economy's resources in an efficient way and promotes the accumulation of wealth on certain individuals, which may later become important sources of investment. On the other hand, there is much debate created by the IMF and the OECD itself, stating that inequality is actually prejudicial for growth as it widens the difference between top earners and bottom earners, exacerbating the problems that it entails. I have listed a series of policy options to address increasing inequality. I believe that governments should aim to alleviate the cost that the causes of income inequality bring to their countries without cutting off the benefits encompassed. The goal should be to enable economies to take advantage of the welfare-enhancing effects that they bring and create a socially fair economic growth. Political polarization is basically the extent to which the public opinion is split into opposing political extremes. It involves either the creation of new political parties or the dispersion of voters among traditional parties on fundamental issues. Of all the causes of political polarization, I would like to highlight the role of immigration. It poses a variety of challenges for every country, as some native citizens may fear that increased immigration will drain their public resources and create a new fiscal burden for them. They perceive immigrants as a threat for their jobs, their education, health services, and other resources provided by the government. These threats are usually translated into raising fear, fear that they may also lead to anger and complete rejection of foreigners. As a result, political parties feed on those feelings of fear and anger. Regarding its effects, political polarization reduces the democratic quality of political systems, both in advanced and in developing democracies. The erosion of democratic quality makes it more difficult for parties to form stable legislative coalitions that are able to design and implement adequate policies for the state and therefore bring the country forward. There are no direct or complete solutions to avoid political polarization and the negative effects it entails. However, there are several ideas that I have explored in the form of policies or attempts to reduce the negative effects inferred by the polarization. I would like to explore the implementation of recurrent referendums on important matters. Countries such as Switzerland, Australia, or the United Kingdom are examples of this type of population questioning. For example, Australia in 2017 used a postal survey to consult its population on whether to pass the law approving same sex marriage or not. It concluded on a 61.1% of the population voting in favor of that law. I believe that this shows how people with different ideologies and voters of different parties are able to have the same opinion on a particular issue and share common views, leading the country forward. So I believe well-designed and post consults in the form of referendums or surveys like in Australia may help bridge the gap between the pronounced partisan divide in several countries. Another interesting policy would be to make voting mandatory for all individuals over a specific age. For example, in Argentina, voting is compulsory for citizens between 18 and 70 years old. Or in Australia again, it is compulsory to vote in federal elections for people over 18 since 1974. Finally, what I believe to be an ultimate solution for the truthful translation of a population's choice would be to develop and reform existing electoral processes and adopt proportional representation mechanisms. The extent to which these indicators are intercorrelated and the influence they exert on each other is unclear. However, there are some assumptions that can be made from the observation and the analysis of trends between them. As we can see on the graph, they have followed similar trends throughout time, and I believe that both indicators are highly interconnected, not only because they share common causes and effects that influence their development and evolution as we have seen on the previous slides, but also because they receive constant feedback from each other. This is, changes in political polarization will affect income inequality levels and vice versa. An important connection to take into account is, for example, globalization, which brings technological change and encourages outsourcing of manufacturing and production plants of companies in order to reduce costs. As a result, countries which outsource their production are now in need of highly skilled employees, as there is more demand for highly educated personnel and lower demand for blue-collar employees, which have either seen their jobs disappear to other countries as a result of outsourcing um, or disappear due to automation. As a result, there is a higher unemployment level among less skilled workers, which already received a lower wage, and thus income inequality is exacerbated in that specific country. Despite their differing nature and definitions, both indicators are clearly intercorrelated, and the degree of polarization and inequality in European and OECD countries can have important economic, social, and political effects that will, no doubt, shape their future development and advances. Their important degree of interconnectedness and correlation can be explained by the factors that cause them. I have concluded that the most important cause or trigger for both political polarization and income inequality is undoubtedly globalization. Thank you for your attention, and I will be available to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.